Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Welcome to today's episode of 30 Minutes Robotic Milking Edition. I'm your host, Marcia Andres, Dairy Science Professor and Extension Specialist at the University of Minnesota in St. Paul. With us today, we also have your co-host, Jim Sulfur, Dairy Extension Educator at the St. Cloud Regional Office. Hi, Jim. Good morning. How are you today?
Good, and welcome everybody.
Okay, as some housekeeping notes here. If you're watching this webinar as a recording and you want to be with us for the virtual discussion next time, please register at z.umn.edu/30minrm to get your unique Zoom link to join the webinar. You'll also be reminded every month of the follow-up webinars and also get a link to the recording that we post on YouTube. Today, we'll be using the Q&A box. Actually, every time we do use the Q&A box, please, not the chat box. And that's found on the bottom of your screen. And you can use this box to type your question or comment. And either Jim or I will read this question on your behalf so our dairy producer can respond. We're very pleased today to have with us dairy producer Brad from Minnesota. Good morning, Brad. Thank you for joining us on a very warm Minnesota day.
Yes,
thank you for joining us. So Brad is going to talk about their operation in Minnesota with 7 robots in a retrofitted dairy barn. And it's very interesting because they also have a manure separator, solids liquid separator. And I thought it'd be interesting discussion today. And I appreciate you taking your time to join us. So I'll disappear for now, and then I'll let you spend a few minutes telling us about your dairy, and then we'll come back for the discussion. Thank you.
Yes, well, good morning, everybody, and thanks for the opportunity to be a part of the 30-minute robot discussion. I do watch these on YouTube usually, so I have learned a lot from my fellow producers over the course of this series. So the picture you're looking at right now is an overall topical view of our current dairy operation. There's a lot of people in this picture. Last September, we had breakfast on the farm where we served about 1,800 people that day. So people are lining up for tours, food, exhibits, and so forth. So just a quick overview, the original part of the facility was built in 1994 as a 6-row freestall facility with milking parlor, office, treatment facility. In 2014, to the right, you see a flat roof. That was an expansion of another feed alley and also another 3 rows of stalls. So our facility technically is a 9-row freestall barn with 2 feed alleys. The front part, you can see the white roof, is our new addition. Since we are retro, everything was added on to the end of the existing facility. So there we have 7 robots. You can see the feed tanks for the robots, utility room, office area, and milk room. Next slide. This is just a picture of one of the robots through our observation room. One thing that is very important to us is our ability to educate the general population. So we put an observation room in with 5 oversized picture windows so people can come in a climate controlled environment and ask questions, watch cows being milked, and so forth. Next. Okay, since our facility is a little bit unique, we have a 9-row barn. So one pen is 2 robots with 3 rows. The other side is 6 rows with 5 rows. So our robots are lined up a little bit differently. So everybody, all the cows on the 6-row side have access to one of each of the 5 robots. They can come and go as they please, and then they all exit out into a common area on the front of the robots. Maybe go to the next slide. This is just another overview. So the area where this cow is standing, when we do our fetch during the morning and the afternoon, this area with a series of gates can turn into a large fetch pen where we can have probably about 40 animals in there. And then they work themselves through the 5 robots until somebody opens the gates again and lets the general population back in. Next, look. So this is just a view again from our observation area. This here is the 2 robot side, and the series of gates that are locked open will close again and turn into a small fetch pen for this side. And usually we can get about 10 to 12 animals in here. This side is a little bit unique because this is pretty much all fresh older cows and heifers. So average days of milk in this pen usually runs between 35 and 40. We do some pre-training of heifers in this pen. It's a little more hands-on because of that. So somebody is usually working the animals in, you know, especially on your first calf heifers or just kind of learning the process. We want to make sure that they get comfortable before they go to the large pen. This is a scene on the front of the 5 robots. The free stalls that you see are basically our treatment pen or facility. So a couple things in this picture to point out. One, we use composted manure solids for our bedding. The other thing is on the left-hand side of the screen, you see 2 tanks coming down, and that provides 2 feedstuffs to our robots, a pellet and a grain mix. Just below that is really key to making this process work with 5 robots. That is a Lely Grazeway system. So when we're sorting cows for time breeding, hoof trimming, vet check, we will route those cows starting at midnight, and they will end up in the course of the evening back into this fetch area in one of these 16 stalls. And from there, we can actually close off one of our feed alleys. So for example, when we do herd health, where we maybe have 60 cows, we can lock off a complete feed alley. The cows that are due for herd health will get put into that area. They lock up. We can do herd health in under an hour because all the cows are in a lineup without disrupting the main herd. So that's one thing that's a little bit different with our type of facility. So the Grazeway is really essential to making this work. Next. So here's another view of the Grazeway. You know, it segregates the cows to go to the back pen or back to the main pen. This is usually, like I said, turned on when we're going to do a hoof trim, vet check, time breeding, and so forth. The other thing that this cow is headed down is a single lane because all the cows exit back into the pen using a single lane. That is where we run our foot bath. So the foot bath is run 3 days a week with a copper sulfate solution. It's emptied out twice over the course of the day to make sure that it's fresh. We also use a product in there to keep our pH lower on the hoof bath, just to make sure it's effective. One thing I should point out, go back one slide. Sorry, Marcia. The area to the right of that cow, it's kind of hard to see, but that's a small pit. And that's an area that we set up that we can stand in that pit, do our dry offs, mastitis treatments, breedings, and stuff like that. Since we're all getting quote unquote older, we didn't feel we wanted to bend down to do dry off cows. So we can stand in that pit and dry our animals off and then segregate them off to our dry cow facility. Go ahead. So this is a picture of our manure system. So basically the first part of it is a little TMR mixer where we would run the waybacks from the cows, the feed that the cows do not consume, and that will be fed into the compost drum through the auger over the course of a 20-hour period. The manure separator basically runs on demand when the levels of our center pit get to a point where it calls. And that drum is 32 feet long. The solids stay in that drum for about 24 hours, and it does not dry the product, but it really does an effective job of killing a vast majority of the bacteria that does grow in green solids. Basically, it's a fairly natural system. That drum rotates slowly around the clock 7 days a week. And you can see on the lower part there, there's a fan one horse motor fan with a blue hose on it. And that is just drawing air through that drum to make a natural compost process. Okay. So this is one of the pieces of technology we added when we put our robots in. It's Lely Discovery. It's basically a oversized Roomba that goes around the pens on a program system that vacuums, but also sprays a little bit of water out the front and the back, which is really essential to keeping our floors from getting slippery. Because with manure solids, you get a layer of fat buildup on your floors that just that little bit of water with the vacuum action actually has kept our floors in probably the best condition they have been in as far as slipperiness for the animals. We currently have 4 of these systems, or 4 of these Roombas. We just recently decided to purchase another Roomba for our large pen because we're finding out as our cow numbers increase and our production goes up, our manure load in our pens has increased. So basically the vacuum is unable to keep up as effectively as it does in this pen. As you can see, the floors are very clean because this is our fresh cow pen with fewer cows. So we're hoping that's going to be a great addition to our system. So this is George. This is the first piece of equipment our dairy purchased. I think it's 5-6 years ago. You can see George has been around the block a little bit. George, well, George does a good job, but sometimes George, it's always 5 o'clock somewhere. George is much better now. We initially had trouble. Well, he did things he shouldn't have done, but he's well behaved now. But anybody who works with us, everybody knows George. So just a piece of humor. Okay, so this is kind of the makeup of our team. Since we automated our facility in 2019, we had 5 additional team members on board to take care of the milking of our cows in the parlor. Since then, we have 1 employee. On the right, that's Steve. And Steve has been with us since 1994. He's our feed manager. He's essential in the feeding of the cows on a daily basis. He monitors and takes care of the feeding equipment, manages the bunker areas and baleage, and probably is in more contact or has more contact with our nutritionists than even we do. So he is our one and only full-time employee now. We have family members that come in and help part-time along with 1 outside person. But this is the main family on the left. My dad, who is quote unquote retired. He still comes in 5 days a week to help with whatever we need him to help with. The next one is my wife, Suzanne. She, along with myself and my brother, Greg, on the right, are currently the owners of Dorrich Dairy. The farm went through succession planning in 2017 to transfer the ownership between us. So that's kind of the management team and the overall overview of the staff here at Dorrich Dairy. So open for questions.
Thank you, Brad. That was a great overview. I'm sure there'll be some additional questions people might have, clarification, as you have somewhat of a unique system here, a different kind of a barn, also using solids and so on, to see if people have questions. Again, please type your questions and comments in the Q&A session, the Q&A box, and then we'll be asking the questions on your behalf. I forgot to ask you earlier, how many cows per robot do you have now in the bigger pen? Of course, the fresh cow pen probably you limit, right? I mean, what's the difference in terms of the number of cows per robot on those pens?
The big pen, we run about 65 cows per robot.
Okay.
The smaller pen with fresh cows, we try to keep that around 55.
55, okay.
Yep, right now, I believe we're averaging 63 across the herd.
Okay.
We are running 441 animals through the robots right now.
Okay. So follow up, somebody asked here, how many fetch cows do you have per day?
We still run between 10 and 12%. And
Okay.
part of that is we are overstocked right now. So our free time, we try to keep it at that 10% mark if we can. We have had heavy calving, so our fetch has gone up a little bit. Once you fall below 10%, it seems like your fetch list has a tendency to grow.
Okay. Okay, sounds good. Jim, maybe you can ask the next question.
Yeah, I'm not sure I understand this. Maybe
Mm.
Brad can. When retrofitting robots, why did you choose the checkout style system? I'm assuming they're talking about that grazing gate. I don't know if either of you are real
check
clear
out
with that.
graces. Mhm.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. So in our facility, doing a retro like we were, our barn is a little bit unique since it is 6 rows with 2 feed alleys. And we had a lot of people that really worked with us on this design. And the reason we went this route was there's no way to figure out how to lay in a traditional style 2 robot system or an L-shaped system. It basically, putting them in a row like we did really allowed us to get more robots in a smaller space to accommodate the cow numbers that would be in that pen.
Okay, interesting. A couple questions here about somatic cell count. What's your herd somatic cell count at the moment?
So that's a great question too. So our cell count is definitely running higher than we would like. And the interesting point about that is that as our cow numbers have increased and as our production has increased, we've come up about 15 pounds per cow since we got into the robots. The manure collectors are kind of under the formula that they were put in under has changed. So we now are producing more manure than each collector was guesstimated as collecting at a given time. So that's why we're going with a different collector to help with manure removal on our large pen, because even though our composted solids going into the pen are, I would say, organically clean, we are contaminating the stalls with the extra manure in the pens. We do go in on a daily basis on some of the lanes and use a skid loader to reduce the load. But that's the reason that we're concerned about that. We're also looking at a different disinfectant to go on the brushes that might work better with manure solids.
Okay, Jim?
What's your average visits? Just a metric question. Average visits per 24 hours, average production, repro. Just you want to expand a little bit more on the metrics? There's a few questions about that.
Yeah, we try to shoot for 2.7 on our visits. I watch our refusal rate to make sure that if that starts dropping below 1, then we get concerned that we have, a feed change or something happening in the diet that is not getting the cows to come to the robot. The other question, as far as production, we run between 88 and 90 pounds per cow, a little higher than that when our butter fat is up, because that's not energy corrected. And the third question, as far as repo goes, we average about 36% on a 21-day preg rate. And that's one thing with robots. Before robots, we ran about 28%. And that has really improved since we got into the robots just by using the technology of the collar.
So basically doing mostly based on activity, you're not using a lot of synchronization.
We still do a double off sync program on the first round. And that was another one of those discussions that we had with our team is what is the most effective management program on how to breed our cows on this farm. And it was concluded that going with kind of a hybrid system with a double off sync and the activity monitors, that was most effective. So we actually run, I think it's about 47% are standing heats, and the other half is time bred.
Okay, so it's half and half. Okay.
Yep.
So how does extremely cold weather affect the robotic milking system? Like extremely cold being when the water lines and manure freeze up in the barn.
Another question coming to us from Minnesota. So our original facility had an interior ceiling on it, which was insulated. So one thing, we have never really dealt with a truly cold environment in our facility. Our barn has never frozen up, quote unquote, solid. So the collectors, you have to work with them a little bit in the wintertime, but our barn stays pretty good. It's really helped being a 9-row facility versus a 6-row. As far as robot rooms go, Very little freezing in there. We did not put in-floor heat in there.
Okay.
We just have a milk house heater in those rooms, and we've gone through some, I would say, a couple nasty winters, and they've stayed really nice.
Interesting. And you're at the end, right? So you think, wow, at the very end of that bar, you know, you get -30 where you are sometimes, and it's just like, it's amazing that it makes it.
The wind is our biggest enemy, like most places. Then if it gets, you know, to that 50 below wind chill factor, then, you know, we will see freezing manure, and it's a different environment. Then there's fog. And that's why we have fans in front of the robots to help keep the fog away from the cameras.
Okay. Jim?
This must be from someone who obviously has robots. We have 29 retrofitted robots on our farm. Have you noticed a difference in your electrical bill? And I know you added cows too, so it might be a little bit hard, but maybe on a per cow basis with your parlor versus your robots.
That is a good question. And I can say this. So we were working with the University of Minnesota out of WC Rock, out of Morris, and they were doing energy studies here. So we have kind of a pre and a post. They were collecting all the data from our farm just to see what our usage was with variable speed drives and so forth. And our energy usage really has stayed about the same, which has been interesting. So I would say really no major difference.
Okay, even though you had a few more cows.
Yes.
Do you use the Pura on your robots if you do have, you know, did you see a drop in the somatic cell count? You know, the Pura is that seaming system that helps clean the cups a little bit better. Do you guys use that at all?
No, we do not. We do not have that option.
Okay. All right. I was also wondering about your cows, you know, they calve, they go right to that fresh pen, right? And then how do you train your heifers to use the robot? Is just by fetching them more often, or what do you guys do?
So the interesting thing about the heifers is the last, we just paused it now here in July because of the volume of cows in our facility. But since last October, we started doing a pre-train on our heifers. So we had them in the main milking fresh pen for about 7 days. And just running them through the robot twice a day gets them acclimated to the noises, the pellets. You know, I think each training session on this robot takes about 3 minutes.
Okay.
You know, they definitely were a lot calmer coming in to the robots. You know, it still seems like it takes us in that 10 to 14 day window to get for that heifer to completely disappear from our fetch list, plus or minus. That hasn't changed dramatically, but the temperament of the animal has definitely changed during a pre-train.
Yes, interesting. And you feed them anything during that pre-train, or they just come in and come out, or
they come in. There's usually some pellets left in the feed trough from other cows, so we did not turn.
So you're not giving any.
On.
Okay.
No.
And you're feeding how many pounds per cow on average in the robots?
I believe the pellets are about 6.5 pounds, and the commodity mix is about 1.5 pounds to 2 pounds.
Okay. All right. Jim, switching gears again here.
Yeah, it's again related to somatic cell count. Do you have the cell counters? And if you do, what do you think of them?
Or if you don't, right?
We do not have the cell counters. I definitely think that would be a good option. They were introduced after our robots were put in place, and it's a matter right now of dollars and cents. But we want to start with kind of solving what we think is the issue before we kind of fine tune it.
Okay. Yeah, I've seen farms that install them, really helped monitor, of course, somatic cell counts.
It's a great tool.
Yeah, we had one farm that installed, and only a few of them, not all their robots, just kind of have some numbers there. But anyway.
Yeah, I've got a follow-up question, Brad. A lot of people probably don't have discovery scrapers in your composting system. Do you want to comment on maintenance on those, both the discovery, the little scrapers, plus your compost bin, or issues with them if people are thinking, you know, I should consider something like that?
The collectors, I would say, are definitely a higher maintenance tool. My brother is very talented on the maintenance of those machines and the programming. They, when they work well. Now, in all fairness, when these collectors were put into our facility with the compost, the bedding that we have, the deep bedded manure solids, it was agreed that between ourselves and our dealer that there was no guarantee. So this is a unique situation for these collectors to go in versus a traditional mattress facility. So they have to tackle some different issues. So it took us some time to manage our stalls, how frequently you need to bed, how much bedding to put in to make sure that bedding isn't drawn out in the alleys, to make too much of a hassle for those collectors to collect. That has been fine-tuned. We actually run driblets of water in our lanes in the summertime to keep them wet enough so the collectors can get the product off the floor. And that has worked well once that system was properly managed. The composter, it's like any piece of equipment. You have good days and you have bad days. It was definitely a good option for us because our facility wasn't set up for sand. It allowed us to create our own reliable source of bedding material at a much lower cost. So there's definitely maintenance on it. We have a good team of a dealer that does an excellent job working with us on maintaining those, that equipment.
Interesting. Coming back to fetching, what is the time criteria that you use to go looking for a cow in the pen? What is the average waiting time to access the robots? And do you see a difference between heifers and cows?
We probably start fetching in that 8 to 9 hour range because we fetch twice a day. So when they get past that point, we definitely want to take a look at them. There are some cows that just are still from the parlor that only like to come twice a day. So some of those cows we may just let go because we know they're still going to come in. The heifers on my side with fresh cows, that's the majority of my fetch list, because once the cows have gone through a full lactation in the robot, they come in, they freshen. If I see them for a day, that's a lot. Most of the older animals come in and they take off to the robots. It's the new animals that I have to work with on my side.
And then it's hard to know the waiting time to access the robot, right? Because you would have to be watching, and that's kind of hard to know, right?
Yeah, and we have a list that we print off, and we can go through that list and either collect those cows or decide not to.
Okay. Jim?
There's also a question about box time. Have you seen an increase in milking speed, or how do you deal with that and kind of this whole timing and maybe box time? It looks like the question's about.
It's two questions in one here.
Yeah.
What's the average box time, and what's also the...
Have you seen it change?
Our average box time, I'd have to look. I can't tell you exactly off the top of my head. It's probably, our box time is a little bit longer than a traditional robot barn because we run an extra second per pass. We do a double pass system on our brushes. So we run an extra second versus what would be called normal because of the solids, to make sure we do a very good job of cleaning the teats. The cows aren't dirty coming in, as you can see in the pictures, but it's just, we want to take that extra step. So here's a good example. We made a decision earlier this summer to take 1 second per pass off, and that gave us 90 minutes of additional free time in the facility to run the cows through.
Wow. Just 1 second, huh?
1 second. I mean, it's all about the numbers.
It does add up, doesn't it?
Yep.
Okay. I think we're getting to our 30-minute time, so I'll be stopping the recording. If somebody else has questions, maybe Brad can stay for an extra couple of minutes, but I want to thank everyone for attending today. We had a great discussion. Again, a very interesting, different kind of setup in this facility. I want to especially thank you, Brad, and your family for participating, and inviting all of you to join us back on August 18th for the episode number 20. So thank you, everyone, and appreciate your participation.